Mesdames, Messieurs, chers actionnaires,
Ladies and gentlemen,
bienvenue.
dear shareholders, welcome.
Je suis heureux de vous retrouver pour l'Assemblée générale.
I'm delighted to see you once again here for
Notre
Eurozair's
assemblée est
general
l'occasion
meeting.
de réunir toute la
A
famille
general
Eurasienne.
meeting is a time to bring together the entire Eurozair family with its shareholders, its corporate officers, teams, managers, and representatives from the companies that we work with and partners. We'd like to tell you about the developments for the group and our ambition for the future. It would also be a pleasure for us to answer any and all questions you may have.
La pandémie nous contraint cette année encore.
The pandemic has once again forced us to meet without the physical presence of our shareholders. Believe me, I wish this wasn't the case as much as you, and I'd like to thank you for understanding the situation. I'd like to ask Mr. Jean-Charles Decaux and Olivier Merveilleux de Vignaux, our two representative members of themselves and also of the largest number of shares, to be scrutineers for this general meeting. Thank you for accepting this function. Mr. Nicolas Huet will be appointed Secretary for the General Meeting as Secretary General for Eurozair. I'd like to give the floor to him to remind us of the legal requirements and for the agenda of this General Meeting. Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, on the screen you can see the agenda for our General Meeting. This mixed General Meeting follows the summons published in the BALO on the 9th of April 2021, published in the Petites Affiches, and the summons, both physical and electronic, that was sent out on the 9th of April to all representative and individual shareholders. Any shareholder has therefore been summoned to this general meeting in compliance with the applicable rules. This general meeting is being broadcast live from the studio in 8 Valois in Paris in compliance with the rules required with the public health crisis. All of the necessary information has been available to the members of the general meeting, and no shareholder has exercised the right to modify the agenda of the general meeting. Having counted the remote memberships and any updates sent up until 3 o'clock yesterday, Mr. Mathieu Asperti has ascertained that the quorum is at 74.79% of shares. Therefore, the General Assembly can validly deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, 2020 was an exceptional year on numerous counts. First of all, due to the unpredictable world health crisis, and also exceptional in Eurozair's ability to overcome this crisis and emerge ever more ambitious and ever stronger. This crisis brought to light two major assets that we have, and I'd like to bring them to your attention. First of all, our great agility. In the first weeks of the lockdown in spring 2020, it was our agility that enabled us to contain the impact of the pandemic on our business. We were able to offer to our portfolio companies a bespoke support solution to maintain their operations and to maintain enough liquidity to ride out the economic slowdown. I can say, as chairman of the supervisory board, that there was extremely high quality in governance during the public health crisis. Every week between the spring and the summer, your board was updated and involved in the management of the consequences of the public health crisis on the company. This close support goes to explain the solid results this year, and I would like to thank the management board of the group for that. We also showed agility in preparing for the economic recovery and in leveraging all opportunities. The excellent performance in the second half of 2020 goes to show that the group has done better than simply riding out the storm. It has been able to grow. It is remarkable that the NAV 85.4 euros per share in 2020 is higher than the pre-crisis level. This performance explains the increased attractivity with third-party investors for the funds which have achieved a record level also. The second asset brought to light by the crisis is the relevance of our investment strategy. The solidity and the strength of our portfolio came directly from our investment choices in high-growth sectors that we decided to invest in over the years. It is also the success due to our diversification strategy, which has enabled us to multiply our growth drivers and to reduce risk. In 2021, the economic recovery will be driven by consumption after many months of lockdown. The recovery plans in Europe, we hope, should support investment over a long period, whereas the US and China are already experiencing strong recovery of their own. Markets are booming, real estate didn't really drop, and individual savings is at a very high level as well. These key components tell us that the economy should be a strong one. This growth is likely to further polarize the difference between the new economy, driven by innovative players in the digital sector, and the more traditional sectors, who are likely to be the major victims of COVID. States and companies will need to take up this mantle together and address growing inequalities and imbalances in social and political spheres. As a pioneer of CSR, our group will play its role in this quest for shared growth. In this environment, Eurazeo has a strong position to maintain its trajectory. The investment strategy in growth sectors will continue, and we will be particularly vigilant on divestments to make sure that we can materialize the created value. Our fundraising targets are ever more ambitious. The Inalvest acquisition for 100% this year is a huge success story and shows that we are going in the right direction to accelerate growth. This involves strengthening the governance within the group. The Supervisory Board gave a positive opinion in March and April on including Christophe Bavière and Marc Frappier on the management board of the group. Two great professionals recognized in their fields who will be a great addition. I'd like to congratulate them. Anne Diaz has not decided to renew her term on the Supervisory Board. That will come to an end today, therefore. I would like to thank her for her contributions to the group. Renewal of Stéphane Pallez will be put to you for a vote today. I would be delighted that Mrs. Pallez can continue to contribute her experience as company leader to the group and also her financial experience. I have confidence in the future of our group. My confidence leads to the dividend this year after suspending it last year due to governmental restrictions. We are putting forward an increased dividend of 20% versus the 2019 dividend. This is the sign that Eurazeo is healthy and continues to grow for the coming years. I would like to thank you for your attention, and it's a great pleasure to me to give the floor to Virginie Morgon. Thank you.
Merci, cher Michel. Chers
Thank you, Michel. Shareholders, partners for Eurozero, I'm delighted to be back here with you for this general meeting 2021. Welcome back. This is an opportunity to talk with you, our loyal shareholders, and also our new shareholders, our chairman, Michel David Veil, and our two vice chairs, Jean-Charles Decaux and Olivier Merveilleux de Vigneault, are here right next to us. All of the members of the Supervisory Board are online watching this general meeting. They have been full of support and commitment to represent you through this very strange year that was 2020. I'd like to thank them for their involvement. General meetings are extremely important for all of our teams. This year it's even more so. First of all, because this general meeting is the final point of a very different year. Our general meeting last year took place at the heart of the public health crisis, and we told you how confident we were in the solidity and the outlook for the group, and the results have borne that out. We emerged from 2020 stronger and in a good position to continue our growth. This is an important and rare moment as well, because we will be announcing today a new brand identity for our group. This will be an identity that matches today's world and shows our ambitions for the future. Nothing ever happens by chance in life, but sometimes there's some serendipity. Every 10 years, 2001, 2011, and today, 28th of April 2021, the group changes its skin like a snake. We change our identity and our brand. 10 years of transformation and the beginning of a new time. We created Eurozero in 2001 with all of the stakeholders back then, and our aim was to support big French companies, Eutelsat, Terreal, big French companies that needed support. The 2011 decade was the beginning of our diversification, with what would become Eurozero PME, opening up our fund to third-party investors, and the beginning of a pioneering action in our industry for CSR. This next decade will be Eurozero as a European entity with worldwide presence in asset management, strongly committed to a strong, sustainable growth trajectory, and a group that has more richness, more maturity, more people, and more successes. Modernizing a brand means embracing the current times, preparing for the future, and also celebrating our successes in the past decade. This path will be guided by diversification of business lines, growth levers, risks, and regions. 10 years ago, we had unique experience for transformation of large and medium-sized companies in France. Today, that identity remains as a capital investor, active shareholder, which still represents 3/4 of our assets. But also, we are a group that has European positioning for private debt with strong ambitions in real estate and infrastructure. Today, our group is able to support companies through all phases of their development, from startups, unicorns, SMEs, and international companies. And finally, one of the few private equity asset managers with strong private equity on top of the raised funds with third-party investors. 22 billion euros invested today in the real economy and creation of sustainable value. 10 years ago, we had a portfolio of 22 big companies, mainly French, that were looking to expand in services and industries internationally. Today, we have 450 companies in which we've invested or that we've financed. We use judgment on dynamics and trends in each market to determine which activity sectors require investment. That is the expertise that lets us design our deal flow, i.e. our investment opportunities that we analyze in the sectors that we believe will have the highest growth. The public health crisis has shown just how this diversification is useful. Investment in strong growth sectors such as digital, health and financial services, resilient investment that stabilized us in sectors such as industry, consumption, education and services. These offset the sectors that were impacted such as travel or leisure. 10 years ago, we were a go-to French leader. Today, we have presence in 10 countries, 4 continents with local teams. We are not only able to support our companies in their international expansion projects, give them access to our business networks, but we're also able to work closely with private international investors in North America, Europe, and in Asia. Eurazeo today has 300 men and women from more than 25 different countries, a great source of pride for a company that was 100% French not that long ago. So a new brand that celebrates where we've come from, and a new brand to build Eurazeo for 2030. This is a new brand of a major player in an industry that is experiencing exceptional growth, a brand that shows who we are, a European leader, a strong, unique group with teams from Eurazeo and Idinvest, and these teams have found their place within this group. We have an ambition to grow and to structure our group based on our ambition for the future, and we are expecting meaningful growth in the future with a main goal, which is turning our brand into a lever for growth in the future. Modernizing means giving a new lease of life to ourselves based on our past successes. The greatest asset of Eurazeo is its history, its reputation. Family investors, long-term committed investors, individual investors that are loyal and strong. The unique asset of our balance sheet, a management team that works together and has been working together for years throughout the cycles and the crises. Investors that are pioneers, that are responsible and leaders in CSR. Loyal to our roots through today's successes and building tomorrow's successes as well. Let us build that together.
Welcome to a new world. A new world where every company plays a major role in shaping the future, and where we have to remain in action. A new world where every new challenge is an opportunity to pursue greatness, and where we must join energies to drive meaningful change. A new world where change happens fast, where we have to move forward to anticipate, to think, to create. Power, better, growth. A new purpose for a new world. A purpose that drives our daily mission to identify, to finance, to accelerate, and to value. The companies that lead transformation, the creative entrepreneurs, the emerging talents. This is a new chapter of our story, supported by a unique and strong brand, showing the world clearly who we are. We are makers, every day in the field at the side of managers and investors, to reveal the best of them. We are audacious, being at the right place at the right time, at the right moment, to identify opportunities, to advance and to create value. We are open, creating the link between present and future, between resources and projects, between ideas and success. We are Eurazeo.
Nous sommes Eurazeo.
We are Eurazeo. We've opted for a single brand, Eurazeo, a strong institution, 130 years of history, constantly in motion, with a promise which embodies our model, our ambition, power, better, growth. We are talking about investing in sustainable growth. It's a promise which shows who we are, a committed brand bold, visionary. I'm enthusiastic and proud of this change for this group, about our successes in the past and yet to come. And most importantly, I'm enthusiastic about the men and women who will continue working every single day at your side, shareholders, to the benefit of us all. It's my great pleasure now to give the floor to Philippe Audouin, Chief Financial Officer of the Eurazeo Group, for his 19th shareholders meeting. See you in a minute.
Merci Virginie.
Thank you, Virginie. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders, it's a real pleasure for me to present to you your company's annual results, which had a very good 2020, considering the difficult context that you're familiar with. First and foremost, though, I'd like to talk about some of the highlights. Your group, in this first ever situation, its soundness, its responsiveness, its commitment, and its dynamism. We continued great momentum of growth in NAV. Our investment activities, dynamic in the second half, such as some very good divestments. Our portfolio showed it was highly resilient, performed very well. Our financial situation continues to be as sound and strong as ever. Let's go through each item, all the financial points pertaining to the past year. Assets under management, often called AUM. So assets under management saw a year of strong growth, 16%, reaching almost 22 billion euros. This is our record high. This new year of growth supports our trajectory of doubling assets under management within a 5 to 7 year period. We're on track. We already announced this at our Capital Market Day last November. This momentum is coming, among other things, from growth in fundraising this year again, reaching a record level. 2.4 billion euros. That's up 19% compared to 2019, which itself was already a record year. Fundraising was driven inter alia by our private equity segment, with a positive calendar there, up 79%. This success is related to the performance of our strategy and also the implementation of unified fundraising teams after the 100% purchase of Idinvest during the year. Increase in assets under management for several years now has led to strong growth in management fees. Strong growth here, reaching 243 million euros in 2020, which is up 13%. Fee-related earnings, FREs, are up by 18% for the year, 70 million euros. Thanks to positive leverage, our FRE margin went up 4 points over the past 4 years. This margin should continue to grow over the next 5 to 7 years, reaching 35 to 40%. Pace of growth, of course, will depend on fundraising cycles. Performance fees should also grow quite significantly in upcoming years. 2020, therefore, confirmed yet again the strong trajectory of growth that we have in our assets management business. Now let's move on to our investments activity, driven by your company's balance sheet. We divested or signed the sale of 4 companies in the portfolio in 2020. Ibercain in Spain, C2S, Farfetch, and CIFA. IRR rates and multiples cash on cash were highly satisfactory. We can say these divestments meant 18 to 43% annual IRRs and cash multiples between 2.2 times and 4.1 times, in spite of the unusual context that we saw in 2020. Each of these exits was conducted at a value well above their most recent valuation, which was taken into account in our NAV as reported. This is thanks to substantial close work done by our teams to support the group's companies and demonstrate their control of the entire investment value chain, selecting the best companies, ability to develop those companies, and essential point, ability to divest them well. And to keep a good pace of divestments in 2021 and 2022, these will be opportunities to reveal the underlying value in our portfolio. On that point, our method of evaluating the NAV is necessarily cautious. During the exit or divestment, the ability to sell the future of companies is what it's all about, to find the right purchaser at the right time. That way, we can optimize the divestment prices. On average, over the past 5 years, we sold our assets with 30% premium versus the most recent reported valuation. In 2020 alone, this was over 4.6 euros per share in terms of value creation in addition to the reported NAV. As I said to you in my introduction, our activities portfolio showed itself high performance and highly resilient during this very unusual year at the beginning of the crisis. You'll remember, we ranked our portfolio into 3 categories. The least impacted, ranging up to the most impacted by COVID. So categories 1, 2, 3. The least impacted ones, least impacted companies, and some of these companies even benefited from the crisis and stepped up their growth during the crisis, representing 90% of our NAV, revalued on average by up 30% in 2020. Pertaining to those assets in category 4, most exposed to travel and to leisure, they only represent now 10% of our net asset value. For the sake of caution, we divided by half the value of these assets. Nevertheless, today we feel this is a very cautious position. We feel these assets have a great deal of potential for recovery. We sold all of our Europe car stakes in the first half of 21, more than 23 million euros above the value of Europe car in a NAV at the 31st of December. We can see the resilience of our portfolio reflected in the figures. The first 3 categories, representing again around 90% of our NAV, booked in 2020 revenues that were overall stable, EBITDA up by 5% over a 12-month period, and even up 8% in the second half of the year. Now, regarding technology assets under Category 1, growth, they saw their revenue on average up by more than 45% over the year. The crisis, for most of these, stepped up their growth thanks to their digital positioning. Digital natives. Only Category 4 assets in travel and leisure saw a strong drop in revenue and an EBITDA in 2020. Their financial situation should nevertheless be such that they will be able to weather the crisis and recover, see a rebound when the situation normalizes. Let's now go to our key indicator, which is our net asset value, the NAV. End of 2020, NAV was 85.4 euros per share, up by 6.3% for the full year, inter alia thanks to a strong recovery in the second half, up 21% in the second half. NAV per share, this is the record high of the whole history of your company. In spite of this great performance, the crisis meant a significant broadening in the spot discount on NAV, about minus 20%, whereas that discount had been lessening to 20% in previous years through the development of management for third parties as well as portfolio diversification. We're continuing group development, which will make it possible, we very much hope, to bring this discount back down to a lower level. Each of our business units contributed to value creation. In the portfolio, in other words, in terms of our companies, gross value creation was 12%, with very strong growth of tech and growth activities, the big winners of the pandemic, up 37%. As we indicated previously, the clear increase in divestments in the second half made it possible for us to reflect in NAV additional value of 4.6 euros per share. Particularly visible if we look at the performance of a real assets activity due to the sale signed end of the year and being finalized now for C2Ss. All these things have an impact on our income statement. Good performance of asset management, almost a doubling in the contribution of investment activities. We also see in our income statement a drop in contribution of companies due to the impact of the crisis on a small number of assets, particularly those in the category 4, which we mentioned a few moments ago. Net income group share minus 160 million euros. We have to say, excluding Europcar and WorldStride's impact in education and travel, the two hardest hit assets among the 55 assets where the group's directly invested, net income would have been positive 217 million euros, which would have been double net income of 2019. This shows the very strong resilience of your group. Last point on these results, let's briefly talk about our financial position. Financial structure continues to be very sound. End of March, our cash, 307 million euros. We still have a revolving credit line, a syndicated line, which is confirmed and fully undrawn, so it was available, of 1.5 billion euros. And we still have no structural debt at Eurozeo. In addition, we have dry powder from our investors of approximately 4 billion euros. That gives us great flexibility in our investments. By way of conclusion on the figures, in tough times, a difficult context, your group achieved great performance in 2020. And yet again is strengthened after this crisis. Now let's talk briefly about our share price performance and our relationship with you, shareholders. Over the 10-year period, April 2011 to April 2021, the Eurozeo share price outperformed the marketplace. Total return to shareholders, 139% versus 118% for the main index for Paris, which is the CAC 40. If we look specifically at the most recent period, which is since our most recent shareholders meeting, which was April of last year, in spite of the temporary drop in the share price in the midst of the crisis, Eurozeo share price outperforms the CAC 40, up 58% versus the CAC 40, going up 40% in the same period for zero. We built this over recent years. With where the groups become today, we can say we very much hope this positive trajectory will continue in the future. So let's talk briefly about our dividend. The chairman indicated this. Considering performance of our activities and the reserves on hand, Eurozeo would like to continue giving its shareholders a dividend which grows on a regular basis, therefore proposing to this AGM payout of a dividend of €1.50, 1.50 per share, in line with the one earmarked for last year, but we had to cancel, and up 20% compared to the last dividend that was paid. Lastly, some news regarding our relationship with our shareholders. We want to be ever closer to them, ever more transparent, using to the utmost the digital tools. So in addition to our other media, we, twice a year, put out video conferences giving our half-yearly results and annual results in digital formats. We also have our app, Eurozeo for Shareholders, available in both French and English, giving you, in your hand, all the information you need on Eurozeo, changes in the share price, news, financial documents. Of course, it's been revamped with the new brand identity, which Virginie just presented to you. Certainly download the app, feel free to do so, and also feel free to give us any comments or suggestions you might have so that we can continue adding to it. We got the Le Revenu awarded us in 2020 on our digital communication to our shareholders, thanks to this app. Lastly, as every year, we've slated a large number of meetings, both online and hopefully in-person meetings as well, once the health situation makes this possible, so we can continue having a very close relationship with you, shareholders. Thank you for your attention. Let me give the floor back to Virginie.
Merci Philippe.
Thank you for that, Philippe. The results for 2020 just go to show our new brand, Power Better Growth. 2020 was a year of growth with a threefold record on assets under management, NAV, and fundraising. 2020 was the year we launched O+, the most ambitious CSR strategy on the marketplace, and 2020 was also the year which showed the relevance of our past investment choices. Power means the ability to multiply, to diversify, and leverage resources for the right entrepreneurial projects. The ability to create value and to align the interests of our shareholders with those of our private investors. Our model is based on two drivers: value creation with profitable investments and growth levers in strong markets, and more attractiveness of our funds for private investors who are looking for recurring, regular performance that only private equity today can deliver. These growth drivers support the group and therefore increase visibility, business opportunities, and our ability to convince entrepreneurs and investors of our cause. As you've seen, all of our divisions contributed to value in 2020. That's what's so important about our model. We have strategic focus, but structural diversification. We have teams that know their market, that know the competition environment, and find their own investment opportunities. This creation of value can be seen through the great divestments that Philippe just discussed. This divestment dynamic is going to continue into 2021. The market is good after 2020, which was a little bit less active and a little bit less attractive for European transactions. Our portfolio has mature assets that benefited from the transformation dynamic that we created. And the added value from divestment is necessary to consolidate the track record of all of our divisions. Our aim is to make all of our strategies leaders in their markets and to grow them in size and in available resources. Today we have 6 divisions, larger than 1 billion each, or that have potential to do so in the very short term. For all of these strategies, we want to grow them, increase their deal flow, and enable them to seize value-creating opportunities. A couple of examples. Our mid-large buyout division, the former Eurozone Capital, accounts for more than 4 billion AUM and will be roadshowing in 2022 with our investors with strong growth ambitions. Our SME team will be entering its 4th round of fundraising to invest for the first time outside of France. The excellent dynamic makes us believe that we can double the share of third-party capital. For our growth strategy, this summer we will be wrapping up the fundraising target, which was more than 1 billion euros, and we've already started to deploy it across 3 investments carried out in 2020. We're also seeing strong trends in our divisions with large shares of third-party investment. We are going to continue to confirm our position of tech financer by doubling the size of our venture strategy for 2023 with a strong market in Europe. The same dynamic is true for our private debt and private fund activities. We want to continue to make them more European, and they have good fundraising dynamics today. For our more recent businesses, funded mainly by our balance sheet, we are applying the same recipe for success that growth has used. That recipe involves strong belief in the potential of a market, investment in high-quality teams, setting up a deal flow and a solid portfolio, and then divestments that create value. Our real estate, sustainable infrastructure, and brand business lines are on that trend and are looking to raise third-party capital soon, which should represent 30 to 40% of the size of our upcoming funds. The success of Eurozeo directly depends on our ability to provide the right products to the right clients. Flagship funds with visible strategy internationally that are competitive, but also bespoke funds that match the strategy, the risk appetite, and the specificities of each client. And always the best CSR standards internationally being applied to each of our funds. We're breaking records left and right since 2017. This is the point of diversification which enables us, through our strategies, to be ever closer to our investors. What do we need to do to continue to grow now? Well, we need larger funds so that the biggest investors can buy in. A dedicated international team specialized per region as well. Thanks to bringing together our strengths with Idinvest, we now have more than 60 professionals dedicated to trade relations, customer services, and fund management. We must continue to internationalize our investor base as well. As you know, in 2020, 25% of our funds were raised outside of France. Our aim is to remain a leader in France, but also to develop our international potential. New partnerships with Asia, with the CIC Chinese Sovereign Fund, and also with a Chinese agri-food company, and currently active discussions with big investors in the region. Of course, we're going to strengthen our American teams, which is the deepest market in the world with huge potential for Eurozeo. The next development driver is to better use private savings. In 2020, French savings reached 200 billion euros. This is due to the COVID crisis. This is 10 times what private equity collects each year. It's important that this money remains in France to support French economy. And that must be done with the least amount of risk for the savers who want to have liquidity and to protect themselves from risk, but also given the extremely low rates. Today, private equity is investing foreign pension funds in France. In the future, this yield must serve French savers as well. I believe that Eurozeo, having the largest retail base in France with 120,000 individual clients with 2 billion euros in AUM through venture capital funds and investment funds, can accelerate this trend. We can now move on to Christophe Bavière, who's going to give you more details on this ambitious growth strategy. With more than 3 billion euros raised, 2020.
Une appétence forte des investisseurs et des marchés pour l'ensemble des savoir-faire d'Eurazeo. Eurazeo se distingue en effet par sa capacité à s'adapter d'une part aux besoins de chacun de ses investisseurs sur tout le spectre de ces trois stratégies, private equity, private debt et real assets, et à toujours délivrer d'autre part les plus hauts standards de performance, de sérieux et de qualité sur des fonds couvrant l'ensemble des opportunités du marché, de la plus jeune start-up en venture jusqu'aux entreprises les plus matures du LBO. La quarantaine de professionnels répartis dans 11 bureaux sur 4 continents, entièrement dédiés à la relation avec nos investisseurs, permet au groupe Eurazeo d'être toujours plus à l'écoute de leurs attentes, plus à l'écoute de leurs besoins. C'est ainsi que nous restons leaders en France auprès de notre base solide d'investisseurs institutionnels, industriels et personnes privées, mais aussi que nous accélérons partout en Europe avec des plans d'action spécifiques. Nous continuons également à développer l'immense potentiel dont nous bénéficions à l'international, aux États-Unis, en Asie, au Moyen-Orient. C'est là que nous renforçons nos services et notre proximité en 2021 avec le recrutement de nouveaux talents qui seront basés à New York, Singapour ou encore à Londres. Nous sommes fiers du chemin parcouru grâce au soutien de l'ensemble de nos parties prenantes. Cette performance nous rend confiants dans notre capacité à battre de nouveaux records, et cela dès 2021.
Merci Christophe.
Thank you, Christophe. After many years of transformation and diversification, it was also fundamentally important for the organization to underpin growth. We went through a decisive stage in 2020. The brand has been unified now. We reap the benefits of the talent, the fit, complementarity, the commitment of all the former Idinvest team members. Group governance has therefore been strengthened. Christophe Bavière and Marc Frappier are joining the group's executive board. Benoît Grossman taking charge of the management company Eurozeo Investment Manager. And 5 divisional chiefs, major group functions, promoted to the Partners Committee. I'm very pleased at this. I congratulate all of you. Welcome to you, one and all. Our organization, therefore, is consolidated with fully invested teams very much pulling for the group as a whole. A team including shareholder employees who believe in the potential for the company's growth and its increasing share price value, committing to the long term, which is demonstrated by the great success by the recent capital increase reserved for employees. The first in Eurozeo's history. Over 90% of employees took part in this. I'm so pleased at this result. This is the first successful stage in building a long-term employee-shareholder relationship. After power, better. Better. That means meaning. Private equity has moved into a new stage, a new era. There's visibility, next comes responsibility. Eurozeo understood this more than 15 years ago, but we speeded this up further this year. What do you need to do to be a leader in CSR? First of all, I'm convinced, it's a strong and long-standing belief of mine, responsibility is a way of powering, speeding up growth for companies. Next, method. You have to have a simple, straightforward method, but an especially demanding method of measurement. Annual measurement of our positioning in the marketplace via ratings and rankings by independent organizations that see us as the benchmark investment company in Europe. In 2020, we received the greatest, the highest recognition, A+, in all the relevant categories by the benchmark network, the UNPRI, measuring non-financial performance exactly as you measure financial performance. Reaching CSR objectives is a component in the variable compensation of your managers. We're measuring the economic, ecological, societal impact of all of our activities. Today, half of the assets we manage are already ranked in the best categories, the top categories under the new European Regulation Articles 8 and 9 on sustainable financing. And especially, we have to have a different, innovative model. As we see it, CSR isn't just about creating some sort of separate impact fund alongside our traditional businesses. No, at Eurozeo, CSR is at the very core of everything we do. That's how we've positioned it. Decarbonization, inclusion, above and beyond specific objectives. There are actual actions, high-impact, tangible actions that we're developing and have been developing over the past few months. A couple of examples. The launching of new strategic investment strategies for infrastructure, the ecology, maritime and land. Inclusion of Eurozeo in the reference methodology for science-based target, decarbonization. We are the first and only investment company worldwide to have committed to this very demanding method to reach carbon neutrality by 2040. We're also talking about mobilizing a solidarity fund of 10 million euros to cope with the health and social consequences of the pandemic. We're talking about increasing our sponsorship and resources that we earmark for associations that we support. All of this shows CSI has been our leitmotif, it's been guiding us in our action. Another major stage for Eurozeo in 2020, the establishment of an endowment fund for education and equal opportunity. Since 2004, Eurozeo has supported 37 associations for an average amount of time of 4 years, spending over 9 million euros on these various sponsorship and patronage programs. The endowment fund has an eye to increasing these resources with an objective of protecting youth, giving access to education, vocational training, and professional training for young people. Today, more than ever before, Eurozeo is talking about contributing to ensuring the future of young people, their social inclusion, and their being part of a more inclusive society. Let's look at the focus in greater detail of our very ambitious CSR program, O+.
As a private equity pioneer that is fully committed to creating a sustainable future, Eurazeo has an ambitious approach to responsibility that is in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Since 2008, we have repeatedly demonstrated our ability to combine corporate responsibility and strong company performance, earning us worldwide recognition. Today, we are the only investment company to be included in the 5 leading families of non-financial benchmark indices. Our CSR program is focused on improving working conditions and social protection for our employees globally. It has also allowed us to prevent the emission of 1 million tons of CO2 and generate savings of over 250 million euros. In light of increasingly urgent climate issues and deepening inequality, we at Eurazeo are expanding our impact. By implementing our new and updated O+ strategy, we can focus on 2 major commitments. We aim to reach net zero emissions by 2040 by using the leading scientific methodology science-based targets. Our course will help us reduce our emissions by 70%. As well, we plan to urge all of our portfolio companies to adopt a decarbonization approach to make them resilient and high-performing in the coming low-carbon economy. We want to continue our efforts on creating a more inclusive society for all. The current high social and health tensions are proof of the urgent need for concretely improving working conditions, however possible. We are eagerly continuing to expand social protection and driving sharing of value creation, equality, and solidarity within our investment companies across the globe. We are facing critical issues, and we are more determined than ever to invest in climate action and inclusion.
Power, better growth.
Power, better growth. Growth to invest today with an eye focusing on the future. We're talking about Eurozeo 2030. The beauty of our business model, keeping the control of time and being able to bring to fruition an actual belief. Let's give an example. Our expertise in tech, and to show you just what we've achieved. In 2011, we set up a strategy in growth equity, Eurozeo Croissance, financed fully from our own equity. In 2013, we refocused its roadmap toward more digital assets. In 2018, we increased resources by merging the Idinvest teams and the Eurozeo Croissance teams. In 2020, we were recognized as the #1 investor in French tech by France Digital, financing 24 of the 40 companies from the Next 40 index. In 2021, we announced the launch of one of the biggest growth funds in Europe. The key to this success has been agility in this strategy, the agility to launch a strategy that we believe in and being able to refocus our investment based on our belief pertaining to market changes. We're talking about agility not just to grow our assets, but also to use the benefits of this growth for the right investments, targeting the right investments. Assets under management are 3 times greater now than 3 years ago, invested in more dynamic sectors. Look how quickly we've been able to adapt and change, being proactive, anticipating economic polarization toward digital sectors and healthcare, for instance, which turned out today to be the major winners. upon leaving the pandemic behind us. 2020 confirms our strategy. 2/3 of our opportunities for investment focused on by your teams have been on digital assets. And all the investments carried out have been carried out in buoyant sectors. Let's talk about those sectors. Technology companies, of course. The COVID crisis stepped up even further the skyrocketing of e-commerce, adoption of e-spending by consumers, increased robotization and connected objects, software and electronic payments. Ditto for healthcare. We've seen increased use of biotech and diagnostics, relocation of production, as well as digitization of various remote medicine processes, and we're also seeing increased digital and clinical trials. Other buoyant sectors that our employees are carefully tracking: financial services, assets management, premium consumption, and software. Our future growth will depend on our ability to invest in the right sectors, to grow our attractiveness in the eyes of investors, and also to broaden our overall geographical footprint. Our target is to increase our share of voice in each of our divisions internationally. Our first objective, to consolidate our position as leader in Europe. We've substantially Europeanized our deal flow and our teams in recent years. Now, we have to further speed up what we're doing with specific efforts in Germany as well as Southern Europe, where there's tremendous potential. Second objective, speed up in the United States. Since 2016, we've been building our U.S. ambition. Currently, our brand is well known and recognized. We're doing some of our first asset divestments in the U.S. this year. It's essential to establish a track record, as you know. Our ambition is to continue broadening our platform in the United States into new sectors in upcoming years, to step up and attract more American investors. Mr. David Veil recalled this earlier. We'll be benefiting from the strong recovery of the U.S. economy after COVID. Our third objective, to continue momentum in Asia. The partnership with the Chinese Sovereign Fund in 2019 was a tremendous accelerator for Eurozeo in that region. Already 3 deals done, and especially a sharing of networks and a real leap in brand awareness recognition for us, which will lead to new partnerships in upcoming months. This is our international ambition, which Marc Frappier will describe for you in this video.
Euraseo a fait le choix de l'international. Dès 2013, nous avons ouvert un bureau en Chine, en 2015 au Brésil. En 2016, nous avons établi Euraseo à New York. En 2018, nous nous sommes implantés en Espagne. Et ces 2 dernières années, c'est à Séoul, Singapour et Londres que nous avons installé des équipes. Aujourd'hui, Euraseo dispose de 11 bureaux sur 4 continents et a su nouer des partenariats stratégiques avec de grands acteurs locaux qui nous font bénéficier de leur savoir-faire et de leur réseau. Le fonds souverain chinois CIC, notre partenaire dans Euraseo China Acceleration Fund, Rhône aux États-Unis et MCH en Espagne. C'est notre force. Cette présence internationale nous permet d'être plus performants dans nos investissements. Nous accompagnons les sociétés hors de leurs frontières, nous leur ouvrons les portes de nouveaux marchés et facilitons leur croissance à l'international. Nous élargissons nos opportunités d'investissement. Déjà 1 milliard investi aux États-Unis par exemple. Nous pouvons donc sélectionner les meilleures opportunités indépendamment de leur géographie. Notre présence internationale nous permet aussi de diversifier notre exposition économique. Notre chiffre d'affaires 2020 a été réalisé à 76% en Europe, 17% aux États-Unis et 7% en Asie. Et cette expansion va se poursuivre. Demain, les États-Unis pour le gros ou la dette privée, et l'Asie qui bénéficie d'une très forte dynamique de croissance et où la présence et la qualité de notre réseau est un énorme avantage. L'ambition d'Euraseo est mondiale.
Merci Marc.
Thank you for that, Mark. In an exceptional and difficult context, 2020 shows that our model is the correct one and our strategy is the correct one as well. 2021 will be doubly important. On the one hand, we have ambitious projects, a solid timeline of fundraising and a set of divestments to leverage our portfolio, continuing to work on our strategic plans, developing new strategic funds in infrastructure and healthcare, increasing our European presence, as you've gathered, and continuing to develop in the US. All of this serves a single purpose, which is to create value for Eurazeo shareholders. I would like to thank you for your loyal support. It is key for the Eurazeo teams. It is your trust and your long-term support that gives us the long-term visibility, stability, and solidity that are required to achieve our goals. We bring together performance, we're demanding, we're disciplined, whilst also working for impact and diversity. That is the strength of our model, agility with transformation. The ability to always see further forward with strong, sustainable growth driven by our new brand, Power Better Growth, to build Eurazeo in 2030. Thank you. Thank you, Virginie. I'm going to briefly run down what the Supervisory Board and its committees did in 2020. First of all, there are 15 members with 2 censors. Mrs. Palez and Diaz had terms that came to an end this year, and Michel David Vey did say that only Mrs. Stéphane Palez wishes to renew her mandate. She is an active member of the CSR, Audit and Supervisory Boards. Let's see it in a video.
Je suis devenue administratrice d'Eurazeo en mai 2013 et depuis cette date, je peux dire qu'Eurazeo a été en constante transformation. Cette transformation, elle a porté sur l'actionnariat, sur la gouvernance, sur le modèle d'affaires, bien entendu, sur le développement international et aussi sur cette capacité à développer une vision de long terme d'investissement responsable qui fait partie des forces de l'entreprise Eurazeo aujourd'hui. Ma valeur ajoutée d'administratrice, elle vient de mes expériences passées. D'abord mon expérience au ministère des Finances, à la direction du Trésor, où j'ai acquis de fortes compétences financières. Et aujourd'hui, je peux apporter une expérience de chef d'entreprise et aussi d'administratrice de nombreux conseils d'administration d'entreprises cotées. Et c'est l'ensemble de ces compétences que je peux mettre au service du conseil de surveillance d'Eurazeo et de ses comités. Être administratrice indépendante d'Eurazeo, c'est d'abord une condition juridique. C'est celle qui consiste à n'avoir ni lien, ni conflit d'intérêts avec l'entreprise Eurazeo, et c'est une condition que je remplis évidemment. Mais au-delà de cela, c'est aussi un état d'esprit, et c'est celui qui doit conduire à défendre en toutes circonstances l'intérêt social de la société Eurazeo et de l'ensemble de ses actionnaires, y compris ceux qui ne sont pas autour de la table du conseil d'administration.
Cher Stéphane,
Thank you for that, Stéphane, and thank you for underlining your important contributions to the Supervisory Board of Eurazeo. Stéphane Palez's term will be coming to the vote today, and as a board member of a large publicly traded company, Stéphane Palez brings her strategic insight, her financial skills, and it will be a great pleasure and indeed a great asset to us if she could continue to work with us. Thank you. In 2020, the work of the board increased due to the COVID-19 crisis. The work with the management board increased, and the supervisory board met 9 times versus 7 in 2019. The members of the board were remarkably present with 98% presence record. The 5 specialized committees, permanent specialized committees, also were heavily involved during the year 2020 with 18 meetings with the attendance rate that you can see on the screen. A reminder of the general assignments of the committees: setting strategy for the company, reviewing the accounts and the financials, governance, and oversight on the investment projects and divestment projects. More particularly, in 2020, the Supervisory Board worked on analyzing the impact of COVID-19 on the portfolio, adapting our strategy to the new business environment, and beyond the current affairs, the members of the board were able to look at things such as approving the CSR policy, which Virginie presented, the purchasing of the remaining part of ID Invest, and also improving governance, rethinking, amongst other things, the role of the board and looking at our ambitions for diversity and feminization. That is what the board and its committees did in 2020. Thank you for your attention. Let us now move on to Mr. Georges Pauget, the chairman of the Compensation, Benefits and Governance Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders, first of all, I would like to express my regret at not being able to be with you in the flesh today. It would have been the opportunity to share with you as part of a dialogue. I am going to be sharing with you the work of the Compensation, Benefits and Governance Committee. As you can see on the screen, this committee is made up of 6 members, 3 of them independent, including the chairman. Our work for 2020, first of all, was on governance of the group. We continued to improve the functioning and the work of the committee. In particular, we redefined the missions for the committee, which is in a central role in the selection and monitoring of investments. We also defined the profile and undertook the search for future members of the Supervisory Board so as to prepare for the updates as some mandates come to term this year. Finally, the composition of the Management Board changed. To take into account changes within the company, 2 new members joined the Management Board. Regarding compensation for members of the Management Board, I would draw to your attention that the variable components of compensation and also the targets associated with this variable component were not changed despite COVID-19. Finally, for the very first time in 2020, we implemented the new performance chart for stock options and performance shares, which was set at the end of 2019. Regarding the fixed component of compensation for members of the Management Board, you will note that these have remained unchanged over the last 3 years. Furthermore, the new members have been included in the Management Board with no change to their previous compensation plans. Regarding now the variable component of the Management Board members for 2020, you will note the almost stability of the variable component of compensation for the financial year. This is explained by the increase in NAV, 6.3%. This is a performance that mainly occurred in the second half. This is a major component in the variable part of compensation. I would add that positive changes in the share price versus the index, CSR targets that were achieved, go to explain furthermore this result. Of course, the results of the companies in which Eurazeo has invested, which are also included in the variable component of compensation, had an impact, a negative impact, or at that, on the overall assessment. Given the difficult environment, it is clear that the Management Board has been able to create value for its shareholders despite the economic impact of the public health crisis, which affected 2 major Eurazeo investments in particular. Regarding stock options and performance shares, as we previously indicated, the attribution conditions for stock options and performance shares are now stricter, tighter than they have been in the past. Since 2020, the performance conditions are related to the Eurozone share price compared to the SBF 120 and LDX TR indicators, and also the delta for the NAV. These are the main components that I wanted to bring to your attention for my part in the proceedings. I would like to wrap up by thanking the members of the committee for being so available and so involved throughout the process, and also thank all of the members of the Supervisory Board. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Georges. Dear shareholders, we will now move on to Isabelle Massin, who works for the Mazars firm, who is going to provide the report for the statutory auditors.
Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The joint statutory auditors have issued 6 reports, which are all contained in the Universal Registration document, which was deposited with the Financial Markets Authority by your group. There are 3 reports pertaining to the ordinary AGM and 3 reports pertaining to the extraordinary annual general meeting. The first 2 reports of ours have to do with the annual financial statements and the consolidated financial statements. They're on pages 338 and 374 of the Universal Registration document. Your management board acknowledged the financial statements and the consolidated financial statements of your group in compliance with French GAAP and the IFRS standards. We certify that these accounts give a true and fair image of the results of the fiscal period, as well as the financial position and assets and liability of your group. In compliance with the provisions in the Commercial Code, a report contains the key audit points, which, as we see it, are the most important ones pertaining to auditing the consolidated financial statements and the financial statements for the fiscal period, as well as the audit assignments which we carried out. The key audit points are given in detail in our reports, as you can see on the screen. There are 2 of these having to do with the annual financial statements and 4 of them having to do with the consolidated financial statements. These key audit points were discussed in detail with your group's management and its audit committee. Our 3rd report has to do with the related party agreements and commitments. These can be found in page 422 of the Universal Registration document. In this report, we present to you for each agreement and commitment the type of agreement, the interest of the agreement for your company, for those that are subject for your approval, as well as the financial conditions attached to the agreements and the physical or legal entities contained therein. Now, in the first part of the report, we indicate the agreements which were previously authorized by your supervisory board and which are submitted to you for approval. This year, 4 new agreements are submitted to you for your approval. In summary, they have to do with the implementation of a joint investment program, Eurozone Growth Secondary Fund. Also, amendment of the program Co-Investment CARICO Growth 3, variable compensation for members of the Executive Board for the 2020 financial year, for those of whom who have a labor contract, and then authorization of the implementation of a program for CARICO Patrimoine 3 investment program. In the second part of our report, we recall for you, firstly, the agreements that you already approved during previous shareholder meetings, which were unused during this past period. Next, we also outline agreements that were approved at the AGM on April 30th, 2020. Now, having to do with our reports pertaining to the extraordinary shareholders meeting, we have no comment we would make on the information given in the Executive Board's report having to do with the deals and authorizations envisaged. Final conditions under which the issuing would be carried out haven't been set yet. Therefore, we have no view on this, nor the possible proposal of elimination of preferential subscription rights. We will establish an additional report, if need be, if these authorizations are used by your Executive Board. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Merci à Isabelle Massa, donc de cabinet.
Thank you, Isabelle Massa from the Mazar firm. It's my pleasure now to begin the question and answer session. We received questions from some associations representing shareholders, as well as some live questions. Nicolas Huet will be leading the Q&A session. Nicolas, over to you.
Merci Virginie. En effet, alors nous avons reçu.
Thank you, Virginie. Yes, we did receive a few questions in writing before the meeting. Several of these were already, some of these answers were already posted on the website. Others we will go through now. Furthermore, we opened up a platform, making it possible for people to ask live questions during the AGM. We also received some of these live questions as well. I will go through many of them here. No particular order now into those questions. First question asked by Shareholders Association, MDC. The association is glad that Eurazeo has made every endeavor so that shareholders can ask questions and vote during the AGM in the best conditions. However, nevertheless, they very much regret that the AGM meetings this year are being held basically just as they were last year, whereas there's no longer an urgent situation. 2022, Coreco is using more high-performance tool for identifying shareholders. Would Eurazeo be in favor of that type of true digital democracy, making it possible to vote electronically? To answer that, Eurazeo is pioneering when it comes to using the vote access system, whereby you can vote electronically before the meeting. For the time being, we feel that voting security is very important, and it's not sufficient. We don't have a system yet. It would be the right one to vote live during the AGM. Once we do find such a system, we will implement it. We will use it, because absolutely that would be useful for shareholder participation, to increase further their participation. We all very much hope we'll begin having our in-person meetings very soon, hopefully next year, so that we can meet with many of you at that time. Second question from the same association, FDIC. Maybe Philippe Audouin would want to field this question. You have an active policy for individual shareholders, increased dividends, web conferences, regional meetings, more recently an app. Special app. Why so much interest for individual shareholders? Well, thank you very much for the question. Eurazeo is a big listed company. 40% of our share capital, though, is held by 3 big families investing for the long term. And then we've got over 16,000 individual shareholders. Their proportion in our share capital over the last few years went from 10 to 15%. That, of course, means that we have increased responsibilities to these individual shareholders, and we attach great importance to this. This is even more important to us, since the individual shareholders very often take a long-term view. They think in the long term. And that long-term commitment is very much in sync with how we are at Eurazeo. As you know, we're very much able to support our companies for the long term, the long haul. Therefore, we attach great importance to our individual shareholders, and we very much, in the future, very much intend to continue maintaining this top-quality relationship with them and continue improving on that relationship with them. Thank you, Philippe. Now, a question On CSR, maybe Olivier Millet might get ready to answer this one. Very regularly, you receive awards in ESG and CSR. This is something shareholders are very interested in, and there's more and more skepticism since there's such a broad mix in the various criteria used and the way the awards are given. What do you think? Would you be prepared in giving careful thought to trying to harmonize these various rating systems? Well, thank you very much for the question. This is something we've been working on for quite some time. We're highly involved in this, such as Sophie Flack, for instance, who's managing director with us, member of the Partners Committee, who in 2020 talked to us about was involved in the EFRAG work at the European level, working precisely on this issue of sets of standards. It's nothing new. We've been working on this with France Invest since the inception of the ESG committee in 2009. We also took part in the MEDEF, various things being done in France by the Employers Association. And Eurozone is a special position. It's a major listed issuer with all the reporting issues relevant to that. Also, we're investors in listed companies. So we're very much at the crux of all of this thought process. Every year, we're involved in CSR strategies that we've been crafting for 15 years and helping others craft as well.
We now have another question in the same line, CSR or environmental social governance, which are very similar. Maybe this is a question for Virginie. What are your real actions and what are your commitments? There's a lot of greenwashing going on. Thank you, Nicolas. It is true that this is something that's ever more present in our strategic commitments and also in the communication that a lot of actors are putting out there everywhere, including in our sector. As to what we are doing de facto, you've been with us for a number of years, and you know, as I presented earlier, that we've been doing things for 15 years. Let me give you a couple of examples. The first one, for the management company, we committed, and this is in line with the recognized scientific methodology, the science-based initiative, we have committed to reduce our carbon emissions of more than 80% by 2040. And that is compared to what our emissions are today. This will require a lot of effort because beyond our growth in the coming years, we also need to draw down our carbon emissions versus today by more than 80%. Some very concrete results for the management company. Last year, reducing CO2 emissions by 30%. The energy mix, which is about 60% renewable. We've made some very real commitments, very ambitious commitments, some of the hardest ones to uphold for the Eurozone companies, the ones in the portfolio, who are going to be called on to toe the line of the decarbonation in line with the science-based target for 2040 as well, with us. As I was saying, of course, it's very important to measure our environmental impact, to implement concrete indicators, and to implement the right investment, CapEx, but not just CapEx investment, to achieve our carbon reduction that we want to see in the portfolio. I gave you very specific examples related to greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, but we've made some very real commitments as well to be more inclusive and more diverse as a group. Eurozone is already very diverse with good gender equality compared to other companies in our sector. 47% of women, 30% in the top 100 talents. But that's not enough yet. We have again set targets for 2040 that we will be monitoring very carefully as well. Thank you, Nicolas. Next question. Christophe Bavière can come and answer this one. You are very ambitious for your fundraising. This is a strategy that you've been developing over the last years. What is your position on your trajectory for third-party strategy, and what kind of means are you allocating to this strategy? As we've seen, we are lucky enough to have loyal investors, prestigious investors who are very demanding but loyal. Some of them have been with us for more than 20 years, multi-generations of funds, and very often they are present in multiple strategies within the group. 90% of them are institutional investors and 10% of them are private investors. By institutions, we mean pension funds, insurers, sovereign funds, family offices. The presence of international investors is already 1/3 of our AUM. Of course, overall, France is strong because of legacy effects, but in 2020, and we're seeing more of this in 2021, we already have funds on which the weight of international investors is higher than the presence of French investors. Our strategy, as we've seen, as you've understood, is to maintain strong ties with French investors, to maintain our French leadership position, to become leaders in Europe, in Germany and in Italy, to leverage our Middle Eastern successes in Asia as well, where we can rely on prestigious partners to push forward. Now we have all of our teams working under a single umbrella. We have more than 40 professionals who are there to listen to the investors in our funds, to serve them. We've hired in London. We saw earlier that we're also ramping up our human resources, and we are also ramping up other forms of resource to better serve the North American market as well. Thank you, Christophe. The next two questions can maybe be taken together and will be for Philippe Audouin. This is Mr. Pasquier asking us when will we come back to the tradition of handing out free shares for Eurazeo. This is similar to the next question, which is what is your upcoming dividend policy? Thank you, Nicolas. As you know, historically, we have regularly handed out shares from 2013 to 2019, so over more than 15 years, our dividend increased 6.7% year on year. For this year, after the hiatus due to governmental recommendations last year, we have significantly increased the dividend 20% versus the previous dividend 2019. As to the future, it's difficult to predict the future and predict what decisions will be made by the management board and made by this general meeting. And we must take into account the changes in recurring revenue brought to us by the third-party investment management. It's not unlikely that dividend will continue to rise significantly over the coming years. Regarding the free shares, indeed, we discontinued the old practice at Eurazeo 2 years ago. But we didn't just discontinue it, we replaced it by something that seemed even better to us. You may remember a free share was basically an increase of 5%, and we've replaced that by an increased dividend of not 5% but 10%. Of course, all has been done legally for the shareholders who've been with us for more than 2 years. We're not going to resume the free share practice as it was replaced by the increase in dividend for some shareholders. Thank you, Philippe. Maybe the final question on our agenda, because it's coming up on 11:30 here in Paris. This one for Virginie. You have regularly mentioned that your individual investors want to invest in private equity, And there is a potential acquisition of a large insurance company in France. Can you tell us whether these private investors can invest in some of your funds and how they would go about that? Well, thank you for that question. So, as you've gathered, Eurazeo is one of the private equity players in France that is one of the most committed to the idea that French savings are fundamental to develop our business lines, but also to directly invest in the French economy. We started this a long time ago. Our first capital funds date back to 1989, our venture capital funds 2012, and the first accounting units 2016. In fact, out of the 22 billion AUM, which was our figure at the end of 2020, out of those assets, 2 billion, 10% are invested by the Eurazeo teams on behalf of French individuals in the real French economy. It's true that some of the most attractive products for investors, for individual savers, are private debt, which makes sense because private debt can have high yield, similar to that of a publicly traded company with risk profile that is highly regulated. Real estate, of course, for very similar reasons, infrastructure, and investment products such as French tech. As I'm sure you are, we're very proud of these products, and these are products that open up Eurazeo growth and other growth products. We have worked and continue to work with large insurance companies, large banks, so you as shareholders in Eurazeo and also as French savers with your own funds, the right to become involved with these funds alongside us to directly support the French economy through these investments. That's absolutely the case, and we have a number of products today which are made available through your points of contact. You can contact us or them. A final question, Virginie, on current affairs, something topical. This is from Mr. Debiev. Are you considering more investments on publicly traded companies? Publicly traded companies? Well, I'm sure by that, seeing as you're talking about acquisitions here, I think you're maybe talking more strategically here. We purchased Idinvest and took minority stakes, strategic minority stakes in MCH and, of course, Rhone, our American partner for a number of years. If by that question, however, you're actually asking about Eurazeo PME or capital that could potentially look into publicly traded companies, maybe as part of a public-to-private operation, that's something that could definitely happen. One of the recent Eurazeo PME transactions, SME transactions, was on a French publicly traded company. So that's my answer for that question. Thank you. Thank you. As we did mention, some questions have been answered online. We have a question from Mrs. Abela, which is not part of what we've discussed today necessarily, but is rather related to Patrick Sayer's departure in the past. We answered that during 2019, and we'll answer that in writing as well. I think that brings us to an end for Q&A. Thank you very much, Nicolas. We can now move on to the resolutions, the presentation of the resolutions and their vote. Ladies and gentlemen, we have relatively few resolutions this year. The full text of this can be found in your invitations and also the registration universal document. I will be updating you on the result of the vote as we go down them. Let's start with the ordinary resolutions. First of all, approval of the individual accounts for the 31st of December 2020. Approved 99.68%. Second, income appropriation on screen and distribution of ordinary dividend. As we discussed, the dividend is 1.5 euros per share and will be paid in cash on the 4th of May. Approved 99.01%. Third resolution is on the approval of the consolidated accounts 31st of December 2020. Approved 99.68%. The fourth resolution is on the approval of the regulated agreement, which you can see in the special report from the statutory auditors presented by Isabelle Massard. Approved 84.88%. Fifth resolution, renewal for 4 years of the term of Mrs. Stéphane Pallez. The profile is on your screen. This appointment is approved 87.36%. Sixth and seventh resolutions, the Supervisory Board is putting to you the compensation policy for 2021 for the members of the Supervisory Board and the Management Board. You can see the detail of this on the universal document. The first one, say on pay ex ante for Supervisory Board members, 99.93%. The seventh resolution is on the compensation policy for members of the Management Board, approval 80.21%. Resolutions 8 to 13 are the approval for the allocated compensation members to the corporate officers and directors for 2021, and also the report for the overall compensation policy as each year. You will see the breakdown of this in the invitation and also the universal document. The report on compensation, first of all, approval 99.01%. Ninth resolution on the chairman, Michel David Vey, 99.91%. 10th resolution on the compensation for 2020 for 21 for Virginie Morgon, 84.48%. 11th resolution, Mr. Philippe Audouin, 84.42% approval. 12th resolution, compensation 2020 of myself, 84.61%. And finally, the 13th resolution is on compensation for 2020 for Olivier Millet, approved 84.42%. The 14th resolution is the renewal of the authorization for share buyback within the legal limits, 10% of capital. The components of this are on screen, and the resolution is approved 84.91%. Resolutions. The extraordinary resolutions number 15 and 16, renewal of the authorization for cancel of share transactions as part of a share buyback program within the legal limits and according to the criteria on screen, approved 98.71%. 16th resolution. This is on the increase in capital through the emission of shares or other assets to the members of the employee shareholder programs or employee savings programs, 99.48% approval. 17th resolution. This is on the preemptive renewal for 2019, allowing the Management Board to attribute shares to employees and corporate officers and sets the ceiling on the free shares to 1% of overall market cap for a period of 12 months. Approved 96.63%. Finally, 18th resolution, powers for formalities, approved 99.99%. Thank you for your attention. Dear shareholders, this brings us to an end of this general meeting. I would like to thank you for your presence, for your loyalty to the Eurozone House. We will see you in April 2022 for our next general meeting, and we hope that we will see you in person this time. Thank you.